Dear learners, welcome to the Inter-University Center for Teacher Education, RIE, Mysore. We are going to learn natural resources in this session. Let's see the introduction first. We all enjoy the sunny day, the winter breeze and a cool shower of rain after hot summer. These are the gift of our Mother Nature to our planet Earth. Rain alone can activate all the dormant seeds to sprout and make the earth lush green. Bright sunlight can only make the plant to prepare its food through photosynthesis. Only the atmosphere can supply fresh breath of air which is priceless. The precious and unique nature of our planet Earth is the existence of life which is depending on many naturally occurring resources. They are such as air, rain, water, soil and sunlight. These are the natural resources that occur within the environment in their original and natural form without the intervention of humans. Now, let's have a look into various strata of earth. The outer crust of the earth is called lithosphere. Water covers 75% of the earth's surface. It is also found underground. These comprise the hydrosphere. The air that covers the whole of the earth like a blanket is called the atmosphere. Living things are found where these three exist. This life supporting zone of the earth where the atmosphere, the hydrosphere and the lithosphere interact and make life possible is known as the biosphere. Living things constitute the biotic component of the biosphere. The air, the water and the soil form the non-living or abiotic components of the biosphere. Let's see the abiotic components in detail. Air. Air is a mixture of many gases like nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide and water vapor. It is interesting to note that even the composition of air is the result of life on earth. In planets such as Venus and Mars, where no life is known to exist, the major component of the atmosphere is found to be carbon dioxide. In fact, carbon dioxide constitutes up to 95 to 97 of the atmosphere on Venus and Mars. The role of the atmosphere in climate control is really wonderful. Being a blanket covering the earth, the atmosphere keeps the average temperature of the earth steady. It prevents the sudden increase in temperature during the daylight hours, and during the night it slows down the escape of heat into outer space. Think of the moon, which is about the same distance from the sun that the earth is. Despite that, on the surface of the moon with no atmosphere, the temperature ranges from 190 degrees centigrade to 110 degrees centigrade. The movement of air that is known as winds. We have all felt the relief brought by cool evening breezes after a hot day. What causes the movement of air and what decides whether this movement will be in the form of a gentle breeze, a strong wind or a terrible storm? What brings us the welcome rains? Let's see in detail. The rain. When water bodies are heated during the day, a large amount of water evaporates and goes into the air. The hot air rises up carrying the water vapor with it. As the air rises, it expands and cools. This cooling causes the water vapor in the air to condense in the form of tiny droplets. This condensation of water is facilitated if some particles could act as the nucleus for these drops to form around. Normally, dust and other suspended particles in the air perform this function. Once the water droplets are formed, they grow bigger by condensation of these water droplets. When the drops have grown big and heavy, they fall in the form of rain, that is called precipitation. Sometimes when the temperature of air is low enough, precipitation may occur in the form of snow, sleet or hail. Rainfall patterns are decided by the prevailing wind patterns. In large parts of India, rains are mostly brought by the southwest or northeast monsoons. We have also heard weather reports that say depressions in the Bay of Bengal have caused rains in some area. Now we are going to see water. A wonder liquid. Water occupies a very large surface of earth and is also found underground. Some amount of water exists in the form of water vapor in the atmosphere. Most of the water on earth's surface is found in seas and oceans and is saline. Fresh water is found frozen in the ice caps at the two poles on the snow covered mountains. The underground water and the water in the rivers, ponds is also fresh. However, the availability of fresh water varies from place to place. Practically every summer, most of the places have to face a shortage of water. And in rural areas where water supply systems have not been installed, the availability of water decides not only the number of individuals of each species that are able to survive in a particular area, but it also decides the diversity of life there. Of course, the availability of water is not the only factor that decides sustainability of life in a region. Other factors like the temperature and the nature of soil also matters. But water is one of the major resources which determine life on land. Now we are going to see soil. Soil is an important resource that decides the diversity of life in an area. But what is the soil and how is it formed? The outermost layer of the earth and is called the crust. The minerals found in this layer supply a variety of nutrients to the life forms. But these minerals will not be available to the organisms if the minerals are bound up in huge rocks. Over long periods of time, thousands and millions of years, the rocks at or near the surface of the earth are broken down by various physical, chemical and some biological processes. The end product of this breaking down is the fine particles of soil. But what are the factors or processes that make soil? Let's see one by one. First one is the sun. The expand and contract action of rocks due to the sun breaks rocks into pieces gradually. Second one is water. Water move on rock flow causes it to break. Frozen water in the rock crevices also break big rocks into smaller particles. Wind. The wind erodes rocks and carries away the particles in its flow. The last one may be living organisms. Living organisms also influences the formation of soil. The lichens or mosses grown on rock crevices break them into pieces eventually. We are going to see the biogeochemical cycles, a constant interaction between the biotic and abiotic components of the biosphere makes a dynamic but stable system. These interactions consist of a transfer of matter and energy between the different components of the biosphere. Let's have a look at some process involved in the maintenance of the above balance. The first one is the water cycle. You have seen how the water evaporates from the water bodies and subsequent condensation of this water vapor leads to rain. But we don't see the seas and oceans drying up. So how is the water returning to these water bodies? The whole process in which water evaporates and falls on the land as rain and later flows back into the sea via rivers is known as the water cycle. This cycle is not as straightforward, simple as this statement seems to imply. It is all of the water that flows on the land doesn't immediately flow back into the sea. Some amount of water percolates into earth and become part of the underground table. Water is also used by terrestrial animal and plants for various life processes. Let's look at another aspect of what happens to water during the water cycle. As you know, water is capable of dissolving a large number of substances as water flows through over rocks containing soluble minerals. Some of them get dissolved in the water. Thus, rivers carry many nutrients from the land to the sea and these are used by the marine organisms. The next one we are going to see is the very important one, that is nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle is very significant in the nature. Nitrogen gas makes up 78% of our atmosphere, and nitrogen is also a part of many molecules essential to life like proteins, nucleic acids, especially DNA, RNA, and some vitamins. Nitrogen is found in other biologically important compounds such as alkaloids and urea too. Nitrogen is thus an essential element for all life forms, and life would be simple if all these life forms could use atmospheric nitrogen directly. That's not possible. However, other than a few forms of bacteria, life forms are not able to convert the comparatively inert nitrogen molecule into forms like nitrates and nitrites, which can be taken up and used to make the required molecules. These nitrogen fixing bacteria may be free living or be associated with some species of dicot plants. Most commonly, the nitrogen fixing bacteria are found in the roots of legumes. Generally, the plants which gives us pulses, they are called as legumes, in special structures called root nodules. Other than these bacteria, the only other manner in which the nitrogen molecules is converted into nitrates and nitrites is by a physical process. During lightning, the high temperature and high pressure created in the air converts nitrogen into oxides of nitrogen. These oxides dissolve in water to give nitric and nitrous acids and fall on the land along with rain. These are then utilized by various life forms. What happens to the nitrogen once it is converted to forms that can be taken up and used to make nitrogen containing molecules? Plants generally take up these nitrates and nitrites and convert them into amino acids, which are used to make proteins. Some other biochemical pathways are used to make the other complex compounds containing nitrogen. These proteins and other complex compounds are subsequently consumed by animals. Once the animal or the plant dies, other bacteria in the soil convert the various forms of nitrogen back into nitrates and nitrites. A different type of bacteria converts the nitrates and nitrites into elemental nitrogen. Thus, there is a nitrogen cycle in nature in which nitrogen passes from its elemental form into the atmosphere into simple forms in the soil and water, which get converted to more complex molecules in living beings and back again to the simple molecules in the atmosphere. We are going to see the carbon cycle next. Carbon is found in various forms on the earth. It occurs in the elemental form as diamonds and graphites. In the combined state, it is found as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as carbonate and hydrogen carbonate salts in various minerals, where all life forms are based on carbon containing molecules like proteins, carbohydrates, fats, nucleic acids and vitamins. We will see a video how a carbon cycle occurs on nature.
The Earth is continuously bombarded with energy from the Sun and radiates most of that energy as heat back into space, making Earth's biosphere an open system in terms of energy. In contrast, the Earth's biosphere is primarily a closed system in terms of water, minerals, and nutrients. There are finite amounts of these substances which are recycled through the living and geological components of the biosphere called a biogeochemical cycle. Carbon, a key element of organic life on Earth, cycles through the biosphere in this way. A tree, like all plants, algae, and cyanobacteria, is an autotroph, an organism that produces its own food from inorganic molecules to facilitate growth. Through photosynthesis, photosynthetic autotrophs use energy from the sun to combine carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water from the soil to form carbohydrates such as glucose. Oxygen is released as a byproduct of photosynthesis. This is where we will start to track the passage of carbon through the carbon cycle. When sunlight strikes a leaf, the energy in the sunlight is captured and used to convert 6 molecules of carbon dioxide gas from the atmosphere into the 6-carbon sugar, glucose, which can be used as a source of energy for cellular reactions. Glucose can then be stored as starch to be used later for energy, or used to make other molecules such as cellulose that form the cell wall of plant cells and contribute to the biomass of the plant. Cellulose is one of the substances aiding in the rigid nature of many plant structures, like the leaves, branches, stems, and trunk. When a log or other portion of a tree is burned, the stored glucose is converted by oxidation back to carbon dioxide gas, which is released into the atmosphere. In a similar way, the burning of fossil fuels, which contain carbon that was sequestered in prehistoric decomposing plant and animal tissues and buried for millions of years, releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Animals are not autotrophs, but heterotrophs. Because heterotrophs depend on the carbon cycle to obtain energy and molecules necessary for growth, they need to consume other organisms. They do this by eating plants, or by eating other animals that eat plants. The glucose a deer acquires from eating plants contains carbon that the plant converted from carbon dioxide gas during photosynthesis. The process of converting glucose to energy, a process called oxidative respiration, uses oxygen to break down glucose molecules in cells, ultimately producing ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the energy of most cellular reactions. Carbon dioxide, generated as a waste product of the metabolic oxidation of glucose, is released into the atmosphere. Through the same process of oxidative respiration, plants also release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This occurs predominantly at night when they are not using carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. In addition to emitting carbon dioxide through oxidative respiration, animals release some carbon as solid waste. These solid waste products are broken down in the soil by decomposers, saprobes, and detritivores. Organisms such as bacteria and fungi that degrade the waste to remove recyclable nutrients that they use for energy and growth. In the process of breaking down animal feces, decaying plants, and dead animals, decomposers also release carbon dioxide gas into the atmosphere. Carbon cycles in a similar way through aquatic ecosystems. Carbon is present in water as dissolved carbon dioxide and bicarbonate ions. Both are sources of carbon for photosynthesis and are taken up by algae and aquatic plants. Carbon dioxide is released into the water through oxidative respiration in these organisms and in other aquatic organisms such as fish, and in decomposition. Carbon dioxide is also exchanged between the water and the atmosphere. The constant absorption of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by photosynthetic organisms and its conversion to carbohydrates by photosynthesis is key to sequestering carbon in the biotic environment. The breakdown of glucose by respiration or burning converts the carbon back to carbon dioxide, releasing it back into the atmosphere. These two processes contribute to the carbon cycle. Because there is a finite amount of carbon in the Earth's biosphere, nutrient cycling such as this is essential to life on Earth. When viewed as a biogeochemical cycle, one can see how the carbon cycle is a balance of carbon stores in the atmosphere, in the bodies of living organisms, and buried in the ground as fossil fuels. Maintaining this cycle in the closed system of the Earth's biosphere allows organisms to live on Earth and participate as key players in the carbon cycle.
Now we are going to see the greenhouse effect. Heat is trapped by glass, and hence the temperature inside a glass enclosure will be much higher than the surroundings. This phenomena was used to create an enclosure where tropical plants could be kept warm during the winters in colder climates. Such enclosures are called greenhouses. Greenhouses have also lent their name to an atmospheric phenomenon. Some gases prevent the escape of the heat from the earth. An increase in the percentage of such gases in the atmosphere would cause the average temperatures to increase worldwide, and this is called the greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases. An increase in the carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere would cause more heat to be retained by the atmosphere and lead to global warming. We are going to see the oxygen cycle. Oxygen is a very abundant element on the earth. It is formed in the elemental form in the atmosphere to the extent of 21%. It is also occurs extensively in the combined form in the earth's crust as well as although in the air in the form of carbon dioxide. In the crust, it is found as the oxides of most metals and silicon and also the carbonates, sulfate, nitrate and other minerals. It is also an essential component of most biological molecules like carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids and fats. But when we talk of the oxygen cycle, we are mainly referring to the cycle that maintains the levels of oxygen in the atmosphere. We are going to see a video showing the oxygen cycle.
Oxygen cycle in nature. Objective: to understand the cycling of oxygen in the environment. In an ecosystem, the interactions between and activities of producers, consumers, and decomposers will result in the release of many chemical substances such as carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen, and water. In this session, let's look at the oxygen cycle and see how oxygen moves through the environment. The atmosphere comprises only 0.35% of the Earth's total oxygen. The major source of oxygen in the atmosphere is photosynthesis. During daylight hours, plants take in the carbon dioxide and use it for photosynthesis, a process that includes the production of oxygen. Phytoplankton are tiny little plants that live on the surface of oceans. Phytoplankton and green algae also makes food through photosynthesis, and they release oxygen in the process. The oxygen that is released by the plants will be used by the animals and plants during respiration. Burning of wood and other fuels, such as those used in vehicles, also uses oxygen. When plants and animals die, they will be decomposed by the microorganisms such as bacteria. The process of decomposition will take up oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Let's recap how oxygen is cycled in the atmosphere. The trees use sunlight and carbon dioxide to produce energy and release oxygen. The animals will breathe in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. The trees use carbon dioxide again for photosynthesis and release oxygen. Summary: oxygen enters the atmosphere through the photosynthesis of plants. Animal and plants take in oxygen through respiration. Decaying organisms also use up oxygen.
Ozone layer. Elemental oxygen is normally found in the form of a diatomic molecule. However, in the upper reaches of the atmosphere, a molecule containing 3 atoms of oxygen is found. This would mean a formula of O3, and this is called ozone. Unlike the normal diatomic molecules of oxygen, ozone is poisonous, and we are lucky that it is not stable nearer to the Earth's surface, but it performs an essential function where it is found. It absorbs harmful radiations from the sun. This prevents those harmful radiations from reaching the surface of the Earth, where they may damage many forms of life. Recently, it was discovered that this ozone layer was getting depleted. Various man-made compounds like CFCs, that is chlorofluorocarbons, which are very stable and not degraded by any biological process, were found to persist in the atmosphere. Once they reached the ozone layer, they would react with the ozone molecules. This resulted in a reduction of the ozone layer, and recently they have discovered a hole in the ozone layer above the Antarctica. It is difficult to imagine life on Earth if the ozone layer dwindles further, but many people think that it would be better not to take chances. They are advocating working towards stopping all the further damage to the ozone layer. And finally, when we speak about the importance of conservation of natural resources, development and conservation can coexist in harmony. When we use the environment in ways that ensure We have resources for the future. It is called sustainable development. There are many different resources we need to conserve in order to live sustainably. Thank you.